Kakalosh Bokato Masechet Yevamot Daf Amud Aleph 23:1. Says the Gemara, Ve'ema Prat Mechayve Lavin. Why don't we say that the pasuk of Bat Eshet Avicha? Remember, it was written two different pasukim, or about Achotecha, whether it was from your father or from your mother, right? It's always your sister. Or we said you're not allowed to live with Bat Eshet Avicha, which is also basically the same thing. So the question is, why do we have two different ones? So it says here, why don't we say that it's Prat L'chayve Lavin? What does that mean, Prat L'chayve Lavin? Why don't we say that it comes to exclude any negative commandments? What it means, negative commandments? It means that if there's a negative commandment to get married to her, right? So therefore, the child, since Kiddushin are not going to be Tofsin, Chayve Lavin, even though we say Halacha yes, but here we're trying to ask no, so therefore it's not really your sister. If it's not really your sister, but a person lives with her, there's no problem. So Amar Rav Papa says, no, Chayve Lavin tafse be'u Kiddushin. For sure, Chayve Lavin is tofes Kiddushin. How do you know that? Tichtiv says in a pasuk, this is to do with Ben Sorer Umoreh. Right after Ben Sorer Umoreh, to do with the concept of the Eshet Fatoa. Okay, it says over here like this. Tichtiv says in a pasuk, Ki tiena li shete nashim. When a person is going to have two wives, ha'achat ahuva v'achat tznuah. One of them is loved and one of them is hated. And then the bechor is going to be for the sinuah. So you're not allowed to do lo yivaker, right? You're not allowed to choose the other bechor. So ask the Gemara, if you right now, you hate one wife and you love the other wife, because of that it's hated and loved in front of Hashem, right? That's nothing to do with it in front of Hashem, what your preference is. El ahuva benisuah. But the pshat ahuva means that she's loved in her nisuim, which means that there's no avera in her marriage. Sinua is sinua benisuah. It means that there's a hatred. Why? Because the marriage itself is bad, okay, which means that there's an avira in the marriage. So therefore, says the Gemara, still the Torah tells you, kitiena leish. What do you mean kitiena? Kitiena means that there is a kiddushin, kitieh, right? That there will be a marriage, right, between these people. So because of that, you see from here that even though the marriage is hated because obviously there's a type of an avira involved, still it's going to be considered a marriage. So therefore, you cannot exclude from Bat Eshet Avicha your sister from Chayve Lavin. She's still your sister, even though it comes from Chayve Lavin. Ask the Gemara, ve'ema prat lechayve kritut. Okay, fine. Maybe it's coming to exclude Chayve kritut. So Amar Rava comes and he says, Amar Kra, it says in a pasuk, Ervat achotecha bat avicha uvat imecha moled bayit moled chutz. Right, the erva of your sister, right? Whether it's bat avicha or bat imecha, moledet bait or moledet chutz. It says whether she was born at home or born outside. Says the Gemara, what is that referring to? So says the Gemara, ben sheomrim lo leavicha, whether they tell your father kayem, which means it says kayem, which means kayemota, which means right, leave her here, leave her married, right? Or ben sheomrim lo leavicha hotze, or whether they're telling your father get rid of her, which means you have to take her out, right? Because why? Because that means obviously Kiddushin is not the same as it's Chayve Kritut. The Torah still says, so you see from here that even if it's your sister from Chayve Kritut, that means you lived with this woman, and this woman was a karet to you, and still you had a girl, that girl is your son's sister. It comes from Chayve Kritut, it doesn't matter. That's what it says over here. When it says Moledet Baitu Moledet Chutz. So says the Gemara, one second. Eima ben shomer lo avicha kayem, or ben shomer lo avicha hotze, amar rachamana ochotecha yilrabot achoto mishivcha v'dekochavim. One second. Why are you coming and you telling me that it's coming to include your sister and chule v'chule? Maybe this pasuk of moledet bait or moledet chutz is coming to include that whether they told your father to, you could stay with her, or whether you told your father that you had to get rid of her. But what are we talking about? Achotecha is coming to include, even if it's an achot coming from a shivcha kenanit or novet kochavim. If you remember yesterday, we learned that somebody that has relations with a goya or with a shivcha kenanit, so it's the same thing, right? A shivcha kenanit or a goya. So therefore, the child is not mityaches after the father, and therefore, since the child is not mityaches after the father, it's not the sister. It's nothing, right? Why? It's completely different. It's nothing to do with him, right? There's no connection to him. So maybe here, when it says achotecha, this comes to include that a person went with a goya. He had a girl. So that girl is the guy's son's sister. It comes from a goya. It doesn't matter. It says achotecha. And the word achotecha comes to include from a shivcha and oved kochavim. So says the Gemara, no, you can't say that. Why? Amar ka, it says in a pasuk, bat eshet avicha. What does it mean, eshet avicha? Mi sheyesh lo ishut la'avicha bah. Only that there's an ishut between your father and her, right? Which means that there has to be kiddushin, which are making it together, eshet avicha. So this comes to exclude the sister from a shivcha kenanit or a oved kochavim or a goya. Why? Because there's no kiddushin. So ask the Gemara, Umar ra'ita. Maraita. What does it mean, Maraita? What did you see? What do you mean, what did you see? Why are you telling me the chayve kritut are included because of the word moledet chutz? And you're coming to exclude shivcha kenanit and goya from bat eshet avicha. He says, kiddushin are not tofsim in any of them. So why did you come and try to say about chayve kritut and not about something else? So says the Gemara, mistabra chayve kritut aval rabot sheken tafse bayen kiddushin le'alma. He says it's much more mistaber to include, right? To include chayve kritut because kiddushin are tofsim in chayve kritut in general, okay, but not in a shivcha or a goya, which means like this, right? One more time, right? What are we talking about, right? We're talking about like this. We're talking about that a person is living with a sister. Now we said that if it's a full sister, right, or even a half sister, it's a problem, right? Obviously, that's what we're talking about in the Torah. Now we're talking about a case where, right, all of a sudden there's not going to be a problem because she's not considered your sister. So there was two different learnings. One of them, it said in the pasuk, so moledet chutz is coming and saying that she was born outside. What does that outside mean? And there's obviously something hidden here, okay? And then there's another part of the pasuk that says bat eshet avicha, right? Erva bat eshet avicha lo tegale, right? That you're not allowed to reveal the nakedness of the daughter of your father. So now, 1 second, she's not your sister. Like what's going on? There has to be something here. So we just now came and said that moledet chutz comes to include chayeve kritut. Chayeve kritut means women which a person lives with them, they're going to have karet, and it's still considered your sister. But when it says bat eshet avicha, this comes to exclude from a goya or shivcha kenanit. Because if a person goes with a goya shivcha kenanit, there's no marriage. It's not bat eshet avicha. There's no marriage there. Since there's no marriage with a goya, it's not your sister. So says the Gemara, why are you coming to include chayve kritut and you're coming to exclude the goya and the shivcha kenanit? They're both kiddushim are not tofsim, both of them. So the Gemara says it's not true. Nistabra chayve kritut you should have included because tafseh be'u kiddushin le'alma. This woman is an erva, is karet for you, but not for somebody else. Meaning it's only family members for you, not for everybody. Yeah? So he comes and he says, Adraba, the opposite. Shivcha ve'oved kochavim aval rabot. The shivcha and oved kochavim you should have included from oledet chutz. The megaira ledidei nami tafsir. If she would have converted, it would have been the tofes kiddushin. Meaning all you need is this goya or shivcha kenanit to convert, and then that's it. So says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Lechi megaira gufa acharinahi. The second that she converts, it's a new entity. It's a new body. It's not the same woman. Remember, the second that a person converts, they're completely a new being. They have nothing to do with the past. Yeah, completely. So he comes and he says it's a completely different person. Fine. So now because of that, it comes out that the shivcha of Oved Kochavim that had a girl, right, the father that does not have kiddushin, le'olam. Why le'olam? Because there's no kiddushin. And even if she would come and she would convert, it's a new entity. So therefore, since there was no kiddushin olam, that's why it came to exclude that girl. So a person, one more time, a person lives with a sister, but it's only the sister because the father had relations with the goya. That's not a sister. So goya, it's not a sister. Okay? Fine. Says the Gemara, V'Rabbanan, the rabbis are arguing with Rabbi Yehuda, and they learn from Batesh Tavicha, Lemiute, Shivcha Ve'Ovedachu. So now 1 second. The rabbis, they argue on Rabbi Yehuda, and they learn that from Batesh Tavicha, that a person that has relations with his sister, bat eshtavicha, you're going to be chayav two averot. Bat eshtavicha and achotecha, your sister and the daughter of your father. Okay? So therefore, there's two averot. So according to that, how do you exclude the shivcha and oved kochavim? How do you exclude the goya and the shivcha kanani? So he says, nafka lehu, he learns it from ma'isha viladea tiel adonea, which means, since it said there in Parashat Mishpatim that the woman, right, which is the shivcha kananit, and her children, they stay to the master. So you see from here that the shivcha kananit and her children, they don't go out free. Why? Because the man goes out free. He goes out free himself because but his children and the shivcha kananit have nothing to do with it. So therefore, they stay as slaves, right, with the master. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, and according to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Chad, right, one pasuk of Aisha Viladea is talking about shivcha kananit, and one pasuk of Bat Eshtavicha is talking about a goya. Now, what's the difference? Why do you need both? It's both the exact same halacha. What's the difference between shivcha kananit and a goya? Both of them are goyot. So he comes and he says, "Utzricha," and you need both cases. Why? The iyashmin and shivcha. If it would have only told you shivcha, mishum de'en lachais, because there's no yichus. A shivcha kananit, right? There's no yichus. She's like mamash. It's like a be'ema, right? That the child is not mitaches after the father. Aval oved kochavim dilechai. But 1 second, right? Oved kochavim comes from the father, meaning a regular goy. They do have genealogy coming up to the father. So imalo, I would say that it's not going to be mitmaet. The yashmin and oved kochavim. If I was going to exclude oved kochavim, mishum delo shaycha mitzvot. A goya has no mitzvot whatsoever. Obviously, you have sheva mitzvot ben enoch, but other than that, there's no mitzvot. Well, shivcha kananit, the shaycha b'mitzvot does have mitzvot. Imalo, I would say that it's not going to exclude the child that comes from her. So therefore, you need both psukim. Ha'isha viladea for the shivcha kananit, and you need the other pasuk of bat eshtavicha for the oved kochavim. So says the Gemara, tzricha, you're right. You need both psukim. Okay? Next. V'rabbanan ashkechan shivcha. According to the rabbis that they learned from bat eshtavicha, they found now the shivcha kananit from isha viladea, oved kochavim and how do you know oved kochavim? How do you know goya? The rabbis now you know shivcha kananit. Well, how do the rabbis know about goya? So he says, maybe you could learn it from the shivcha. He says, you just said that you needed to learn it both. Why? Because the shivcha has mitzvot, and the oved kochavim does not have mitzvot, so you cannot learn one from another. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Says Rabbi Yochanan name Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Amar Kra, it says in a pasuk in Devarim. Yeah, what does it say? Yeah. It says, right? Ki asira bincha me'acharai. What does that mean? You're going to turn astray my son, right, from me, and they're going to go serve other gods. What does that mean? Bincha mi-Israelit karoi bincha. Your child from a Israelite, right, that comes from a goy, is still called your child. But the child from a goya is not called your child, but rather her child. Benah, her child. Because when it said over there it says, you're not allowed to get married to the goyim. Your daughter you're not allowed to give to the son, meaning your daughter you're not allowed to give to a goy. And you're not allowed to give your daughter to the goy. Okay, so he says over here, the daughter you're not allowed to take to your son. Then it says, but it's going to take away the son from me. What does that mean? Only bincha mi-Israelit is called bincha, but not bincha ma-Vekoim is called benah. So Amar Ravina says, we learn from here, Shema Mina, we learn from here, ben bitcha haba min oved kochavim kor bincha. Even if you have a son from your daughter, that your daughter got married to a goy, it's still your child, right? And that's halakha even today, right? If a Jewish girl, right, let's say a person's daughter, bar minan obviously, but a person's daughter gets married to a goy, right? That child is still your son. It's still meaning it's still continuation in the genealogy. It's still a Jew. So says the Gemara, Leima kasav Ravina oved kochavim ve'eved abal bat Yisrael avla kasher. Are you going to tell me that Ravina holds that if a goy or an eved has relations with a normal Jewish woman, the child is kasher? Right? Because you just said that the Vlad is like her, which means it's still her child. So what? It's a kosher child. So says the Gemara, no. It's not a mamzer, and it's not a kasher, but it's Yisrael Pasul Mikre. It's called Yisrael Pasul. that means there's still a disqualification in the child. The child has a defect. Okay? Just like, by the way, even until today, they have such a thing. Do you know that if a child is born out of wedlock, out of wedlock, wedlock means wedding, locked. When you get married, you get locked in. If a child is born out of wedlock, right, which means that they was born without marriage, meaning a boyfriend, girlfriend went together, they had a child. That's called out of wedlock, out of marriage. Once upon a time, that was considered a defect, right? Nowadays, it became the minhag haolam, right? No. We're talking about goyim. We're talking about goyim even goyim. Forget about the Jews, right? We're talking about that was considered a defect. Why is it a defect? Because there's no marriage. Nowadays, it became the minhag. You don't need to get married. Why would you get married? More headaches. Understand? Said, hi, b'shiva umot ketiv. 1 second. This pasuk of Kiyasid Bincha is only talking about the Shiva Umot. It's not talking about everybody. So answers the Gemara, Kiyasid, the Rabot Kol HaMasrim. When it says Kiyasid, when he's going to do it, it's extra, right? Because it's, so therefore, since it's extra, it's coming to include anybody that's Mesiz. So it's loved up because of Shiva Umot, which are the 7 nations that lived in Israel at the time, but it's actually everybody. So says the Gemara, Hani Chal Rabbi Shimon Darish Samadekra. That's good according to the Rabbi Shimon, that he's going to be Doresh, the reasoning of the Pasuk. That means the reasoning of the Pasuk is because Kiyasida Bincha. So it applies to everybody. Lav Davka to the 7 nations. But according to the rabbis, that they are not Doresh Tama Dikra. Tama is the reasoning of the Pasuk. So therefore, Menalehu, how do you know that it applies to every Goy? Right? According to them, it's only going to be for the 7 nations. So he says, Man Tana de Paligale, de Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yudah. Who is the Tana that argues on Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yudah? And he says, right, like that, Chachamim, Rabbi Shimon, it's Rabbi Shimon, he's the one that's Toresh Tamadikra. So according to him, it does make sense that he could say Kiyasid Bincha applies to everybody. Because since he's the one that argues and he's the one that says that Kiyasid Bincha applies to everybody because he's Toresh Tamadikra, so then everything works out perfectly. Says the Mishnah, Kav Gimel Amud Bet, 23b. Says the Mishnah, okay? So now the Mishnah says like this: Mi shekidesh achat mishtei achayot ve'en yodea eze mehen kidesh. Right? Imagine right now you have a person that he gets married to one of 2 sisters, but he doesn't know who he did kiddushin to. Yeah, he came and he gave a ring to 2 sisters. He doesn't know which one. Right? By the way, you should know this could happen many times, especially with twins. Just happened to be right now outside with Rav Katzin. Yeah. So he comes and he says, he doesn't know. So what does he do? No, then get lezev, get lezu. Right? You have to give a get to each one of them. Yeah. Why? Because if he's going to go with one, maybe he got married to the sister, and that means he's going with a chot ishto. So therefore, he doesn't know which one to go with. He doesn't know, right? So therefore, he has to give a get to both women. Okay? Met. What happens if he dies before giving the get?
So one is
right?
considered divorced.
Yeah, well, yeah. V'yeshlo ach echad. Now he's got one brother. Okay, so now both of them are permitted to get married, right? Why? Because each one is safek who's eshet amet and who needs ibum and chalitza. So therefore, so what does he have to do? Choletz l'shten. You have to do chalitza to both of them. It makes sense at the end of the day. You don't know who it is. You have to do chalitza to both. Okay, fine. Hayulo shnaim. What happens if he has 2 brothers? So echad choletz ve'echad miyabem. So one of them does chalitza, and one of them is allowed to do yibum, right? So therefore, that means the basically he could do yibum to the other sister if he wanted to. Okay, karmu v'kinsu. If each one of the brothers, right, went and got married to one of these girls, en motzi miyadam, we're not going to force them to divorce. Now, why? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be considered like 2 brothers getting married to 2 sisters. That's permitted. Not only that, one of them, Niman of Shach, was the Yevamah. So therefore, the one that went with the Yevamah was good. And the other one that went with his sister was also good. There's no problem. So because of that, we don't force them to get divorced. Even though lechatchila, we said that what we did before, that one of them does chalitza, one of them does ibum. If they both got married, we don't force them to do divorce. Shnaim shekitshu, right? Shtei achayot. 2 people which are not family members that get married to 2 sisters. Ze en yodea ezo kiddush, v'ze en yodea ezo kiddush. So now the 2 men, which are not brothers, do not know which one they got married to. So now again, you've got a problem of achot ishto. Okay? So imagine 2 guys, right? They're friends. They come to 2 sisters and they got married. Now, they don't remember which one was which. Yeah, they could be the twins. It could be whatever the case was. They don't remember which one's which. So what happens? Zenoten shnegitin. Each one has to give 2 gets, right? Because he has to give 1 get to one and 1 get to the other one. And the other guy also 1 get to one, 1 get to the other one. He doesn't know who he got married to. Metu if they both die. And each one has a brother. Each one has to do chalitza to both of them. Okay, so again, until here everything's clear, because whenever there's a case of a doubt and we do not know, you either have to do chalitza to both or get to both, which makes sense. Okay, now we start. Lazeh echad velazeh shnayim. What happens if one brother, one of the people, they have one brother, another one has 2 brothers? So the yachid, the one that has only one brother, he has to do chalitza to both of the sisters. Vashnayim, right, and the one that has 2 brothers, right? Echad choletz, echad miyabem. One does chalitza, one does ibum. Kadmu vekansu. What happens if the 2 brothers, right, of the one? Remember, the 2 brothers of one of the guys that died. What happens if he went in kansu and he got married to both of them, right? The 2 brothers got married to both sisters. And motzi miyadam. We don't force them to get divorced. Now we're here. Lezeh shnayim velezeh shnayim. Okay, for this one you've got 2, and this one you have 2. Look at the picture. Okay, here you have 3 brothers and 3 brothers. Levi, Shimon, and Reuven, Moshe, Aaron, and Lazar. 3 brothers, 3 brothers. Okay? It was the same case that we brought up here, which was Lezeh Echad Lezeh Shnayim, which I explained it outside. I didn't explain it to here. This Reuven had 1 brother, and Moshe had 2 brothers. Okay, Aaron and Lazar. And remember, Reuven and Moshe, which are strangers, got married to Rachel and Leah. Okay? So therefore, what happens is now Reuven and Moshe died. So that's a pshat that one person has 1 brother, and this one has 2 brothers. What do we say? In this case, the one brother does chalitza to both, and then these, they could do yibum. What happens if both of them came and they got married to both sisters? We don't take them out. Says now the Gemara, the Otomi Kreshleel, Moshe had 2 brothers, right? Which is Aaron and Lazar. Reuven had 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi. Says the Mishnah, Achiv Shel Zeh, which is the brothers of Reuven, which are over here. These 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi. Okay, for example, let's say Shimon, he does chalitza to one of them. Let's say he did chalitza to Leah. That's this one over here. So Shimon does chalitza to Leah. Now, Achiv Shel Zeh, which is the brother of Moshe, right? Let's say, for example, Aharon, he does chalitza to Rachel. Okay? Now, afterwards, the brother of Shimon, which is the brother of Shimon, Levi, so Levi does ibum to the chalutzato shel Aaron. So Levi does ibum to Leah. Okay, that's this one, Levi to Leah. Okay, right? Dainu Levi miyabem chalutzato shel of Aharon. Sorry, not to Leah, to Rachel. Right, the Levi does ibum to Rachel, and then Achiv Shel Zeh, which is the brother of Aaron, which is Elazar, he does ibum to the chalutzato shel Shimon, which is going to be Leah. Okay, so remember, the dotted lines was the chalitza, the straight lines, right? These straight lines is a yibum. Okay, so one more time. Here, Shimon did chalitza to Leah, and then Elazar got married to Leah, and Aaron did chalitza to Rachel, and Levi does yibum to Rachel. Okay, lezeh shnayim velezeh shnayim. Achiv shel zeh choletz la'achat, ve'achiv shel zeh choletz la'achat. So one of the brothers has to do chalitza to one of them, and from the other side, one of the brothers does chalitza to the other one. Then achiv shel zeh biyamem chalutzato shel zeh. The brother could do the yibum to the other one. Ve'achiv shel zeh, the brother could do the yibum to the chalutzato shel zeh. Kadmu shnayim bechaltzu. What happens if the two brothers of one met do chalitza to the 2 sisters? Meaning, I don't know if we have the picture. No. For example, let's say here, these 2 brothers, Shimon and Levi, they both do chalitza to the Rachel and Leah. Okay? So the 2 brothers did the chalitza to the 2 sisters. Lo yibmu shnayim, so then the other 2, which is here, Aaron and Lazar, cannot get married to them. Ela echad choletz, ve'echad miyabem. One of them does chalitza, and one of them does ibum. Okay? Kadmu ve'kansu. What happens if the 2 other ones came and they got married to them after the chalitza of the first ones, right? Which means that they didn't ask him, but they just went and they got married. En motzi miyadam. We don't force them to get divorced. Okay? Fine. Until here, we're clear? There's the Gemara. Shema mina. We learn from the Mishnah. Kiddushin she'en musurin labia havi kiddushin. That means if you right now get married to a woman, but you cannot have relations, Why can't you have relations? Because you don't know if it's the right one. It's still considered a kiddushin, right? Why? Because each one of the sisters is prohibited to the guy because of a chotishto. And the fact that we still said noten get lezeh, which means that each one you have to give a get to both of them, that shows that there was still a kiddushin. So it means you see from here that even a kiddushin, which you cannot have relations with, because here you cannot have relations with one because maybe it's the other one, the other one. You don't know which one. You have to give a get to both of them. So it's called a kiddushin.
Then can you remarry one?
So it says the Gemara. Kakadosh, we're continuing Bezrat Hashem Kaf Gimel Mubet in the Gemara. The Gemara says Shema Mina Kiddushin She'en Masurin Lebiyah Avu Kiddushin. So what do we just say? We just said that we can learn from here that Kiddushin, which you cannot have relations, it's still considered Kiddushin. Why? Because this person came and he got married to two sisters. He doesn't know which one. So now obviously he can't have relations with one or the other because you don't know which one he's married to. And if he goes with the other one, that means he's having relations with his wife's sister, which is prohibited, right? So because of that, in the Gemara said also he has to give a get to each one. So because of that, you see from here that it's still considered a marriage. So says the Gemara, that's not true. What are we dealing with? Which means this. During the time of the Kiddushin, you knew which one you got married to. It's only afterwards you forgot. And the fact that you only forgot afterwards and it got mixed up, so because of that, the Kiddushin were Misurim Lebiyah from the beginning. That means the Kiddushin at the beginning were Hechal. It was good. Why? Because you could have relations with your wife. But now afterwards, they didn't know which one. It was only afterwards. At the time, you went to the woman. Here it is, this. Okay, I know it's you. I know you. Yeah, but then afterwards, it got lost. So because of that, that's when it happens. He says, afterwards, it was because of the Safek, and therefore, Levasof, Nitarvu, right? Now that was Nitarvu, so now you have this problem. Okay? Beikanami diktani, right? We could also deduce it from the Mishnah, because in the Mishnah it says, Ve'eno yodea, which means you don't know which one, right, you got married to, which means Beshata Kiddushin, it was known. Now it's En yodea. Ve'lo ktani, and we didn't learn Ve'eno yadua. Eno yadua means it was never known. Okay? Eno yadua means it was never known. Eno yodea means right now you don't know, but you did know. Meaning 5 minutes ago you knew. Now you don't know. That's eno yodea. Yadua means it was never known. Shema mina. So we could actually learn from the Mishnah, deduce from the Mishnah, that really be'emet, at the beginning you didn't know. So since at the beginning you didn't know which one you got married to, you cannot bring me a proof against that Kiddushin, which is not fitting for Biyah, is not Kiddushin. Why? Because be'emet, it was fitting for Biyah at the beginning. It was fitting for relations. Only afterwards it was not known. So ask the Gemara, what is it coming to teach you? So says the Gemara, Seifa itzrichale, right? We need it for the Seifa. Met velo echad, right? What happens now in the Seifa? The Seifa of the Mishnah said, what happens now if he dies without children? Okay, before he gives the get. So what happens? And he has one brother. You remember this case? This is the case of the Mishnah. So the guy dies without giving the get. He has one brother. So choletz tishten. So in order, he has to do chalitza to both of them. We don't know which one it was. So you do chalitza to both of them. Okay? I still also don't know. Maybe it's that you can't ask them, the girls, right? Because that's a famous thing. Why don't you just ask the girls? Like, you understand? Like, why don't I don't know exactly if it's because that they can't answer or they just, I don't know. I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, or it could be that maybe even that they're not believed. I'm not sure. Like, you understand? Like, it could be that even. So the Seifa, it says, Met velo ach echad. So again, the guy dies and he's got a brother. Choletz ishten. So he does chalitza to both of them. Hayulo shnaim. If he has two brothers, echad choletz, one of them does chalitza, another one he could do yibum. Okay, to the other one, meaning that no, but he could yabem if he wants to. Okay, so dafka michlatz first needs to be done the chalitza to one of them, and then the yibum could be done to the other sister. But to do the yibum at the beginning, lo doesn't help. Why? Because then he's going to be pogea ba'achot zekukato, which is assumed derbanan, which means if one of them is first done chalitza, so manavshach, the other one now could be done yibum. Because if that one was the one that was supposed to be done yibum, then perfect. If it was not supposed to be do yibum, so then some. So he got married to this girl. No problem. There's no problem whatsoever. Okay. But now what happens in a case where it was first yibum and then it was done chalitza to the other woman? So in such a case,
she wasn't the right one.
if she was, then he's achot, then she's achot zekukato, because basically this woman is supposed to get married to him, but he didn't do the yibum to her. He did the yibum to her. So before the chalitza, so that's achot zekukato. Achot zekukato, you can't go and live with it. Okay, fine. As in the Mishnah, this is in the two dots where it says now, you've got two people that got married to two sisters. Okay, now remember, each one doesn't know which one they got married to. Now, these two people are not brothers. It's not two brothers to two sisters. It's two strangers to two sisters. Shemami, now we learn from here. Kiddushin, we learn from here the same thing. Kiddushin, which are not for relations, it's still considered Kiddushin. Why? Because they both have to give gets. 1 second, but they couldn't have relations. Says the Gemara, the same answer. First, they were recognized. You know exactly who you got married to. And then afterwards, they got switched. You could also bring a proof from the Mishnah, but it says, you don't know it. Know it means now you don't know it. We didn't learn that you didn't know about it in the past. Shmamina. So ask the Gemara, we already learned that in the first case. Meaning like this, if a Mishnah is going to teach us halacha, each one has to have a chidush. It's not going to teach us the same thing again. It's not deja vu. It's not a broken record, right? Again and again and again. So it's the exact same case. So what's the difference between the first case and the second case? If we're talking about that both cases, they knew who they got married to, and only afterwards they got confused and they got mixed up. So it says the Gemara, Seifa, you need it for the Seifa. Why? Because metu, if they both died and they didn't give the gets, one of them had one brother and the other one had two brothers. Hayachid choletz shtem, the Yachid does chalitza to both the women, and then the two of them, one does chalitza, one does ibum. So says the Gemara, but that's Hainorisha. That's also the same thing. That's the first case as well. What's the difference between the first case and the second case? So it says no. Mao the tema, I would have thought to say, ligzur trei atuchad. I'm going to make a gezerah that even if there's going to be two brothers, there should not be done yibum, right? Why? Because maybe one brother will come and do yibum, and he's not allowed to do yibum because he's going to be pogea ba'achot zekukato. Remember, one of them has to do the chalitza before the yibum. Kamashmalan, that we don't make such a gezerah, and one of them is allowed to come to do yibum. Okay, that means we don't make a gezerah for the two. Okay, so says the Gemara, davka michlatz v'hadar yibum. First, you have to do chalitza, and then you do the yibum. Aval yibum bereisha lo. But to do yibum at the beginning, no. Why? Because if you're going to do yibum at the beginning, you're going to be pogea b'yevama in the shuk, and it's assuming a Torah. What does that mean? If one of the two brothers did yibum at the beginning before the chalitza of the other brother, he's not allowed to, because maybe be'emet, that sister is not as yevama. Now, if that sister is not as yevama, it comes out that the yevama is going to go out to the shuk without anything. And that means you have to do the chalitza to one of the women first, and then you could do the yibum afterwards. The next two dots in the Gemara, Lazesh time and Lazesh time, this two people and this two people. Hatulam, why do I need this? Why do I need it now again, right? That we're talking about the brother of this one, the brother of this one. That means these two people, both of them had two brothers. Why do I need this case now? Hainuhach, it's the exact same thing. So maybe you're going to do yibum without chalitza. Kamashmalan, the same thing, which means that we're going to say that again. We're always suspecting maybe you would do yibum without chalitza. If you do yibum without chalitza, you have a problem. So kamashmalan, right? That we don't have this problem. So ma'ishna me'adetanan. So what's the difference that which we learned in the Mishnah? Arba'a achin. When you have four brothers, shnai me'em nisuim shtei achayot. You've got four brothers, two brothers married to two sisters. Umetu nisuim et achayot. So remember this case? You had four brothers, two married to two sisters. The ones which are married to the sisters, they died. So it says over there, cholsot velo mityevamot. They do chalitza, not yibum. Why in this case does the Mishnah say that they're not allowed to do yibum to one of the brothers? Right? And in our case, they are allowed to do yibum. Because once one person does chalitza, the other one could do yibum. Right? So therefore, what's the difference? So says the Gemara, can you compare both cases? Hatam over there, it's a different case. Why? Because of the mandamar, right, of going back and forth. But Hashem will continue tomorrow.